Is Rishi Sunak an effective communicator? Is he good at getting his messages across to the British public? My name's Richard, and I've worked in communications for many years, helping leaders to speak effectively. Now, today we're going to have a look at a recent speech by Rishi and see what he does well, what he doesn't do so well, and what we can learn from a communications perspective. Okay, let's get started.
Right. Well, thank you. I don't think I'm right. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Isn't she great, ladies and gentlemen? She's fantastic, MP.
Really nice energy there, big smile, warm round of applause, nice start.
It's really great to be with you. Let me get straight to it. 2023 last year was not an easy year for anyone.
I think we can all agree with that.
Still dealing with the legacy of COVID and the impact that was having on backlogs on our public services. The war in Ukraine, still driving up everyone's energy bills, and the dangers of a new conflict in the Middle East.
Rishi's got straight into talking about the war in Ukraine, legacy of COVID, all of that big stuff. But what I would have really liked to have seen him do is to make a connection with that audience. They're in a local area. It looks like they're in the northwest of England. And he should have made some sort of reference to their area, made some joke if he had one, but just make a connection with the audience on their own terms before pivoting in to the more national messages.
We have made progress. And at the start of this year, we are heading in the right direction.
Which is nice to hear.
The choice now is whether we stick with the plan that is starting to deliver the long-term change that our country needs, or go back to square one with no plan, no progress.
This is him getting a bit catty, going in on Keir Starmer, saying he'd take the country back to square one, which is a sort of replay of the whole David Cameron, Ed Miliband, chaos with Ed Miliband thing, which was actually quite effective, aided by Ed Miliband's inability to eat a bacon sandwich. But just going back to square one, is that really a strong enough attack line at the beginning of a speech? I'm not so sure.
I set out a year ago 5 priorities. Those 5 priorities.
He talked about those 5 priorities absolutely endlessly last year, but I think I can only remember about 2 of them. There's definitely like stopping the boats. I remember that. Maybe something about inflation, but what the other 3 were, yeah, I don't know.
Weren't just my priorities. They were your priorities. They were the country's priorities. And they were about our economy, our borders, and our NHS.
A bit of a performance point here. Rishi is speaking in the round, which means he's got the audience all around him. Now, his response to that seems to be just to be continually turning around in both directions, which makes him look a little bit out of control, a little bit over eager to get audience interaction going. What I'd rather see is a more stable approach where he looks one way, makes eye contact, then turns 90 degrees, looks at the audience there, 90 degrees again, much more stable, more methodical, and that would build his authority and his connection with the audience.
In a nutshell, on all 5 priorities, we have made progress.
How much progress is open to question.
Let's start with the boats and stopping the boats.
Yeah, let's start with the boat, shall we?
Last year, the number of people coming here illegally was down by over 35%. In the last quarter of the year, it was down by over 50%. So that shows that we're making progress, particularly when you consider when I got this job, the numbers had quadrupled in the past few years. They'd never gone down, and everyone said to me, you can't do anything about this problem. It's insoluble.
Rishi's using some data there, talking about how the numbers have gone down 35%, 50%. But then after that, he talks about how the numbers had previously quadrupled, which makes it sound like they got completely out of hand. And I don't think he really needed to bring that in at this stage. Maybe a better approach would be to keep it simple, just to say the numbers have gone down 35%, and here's the plan to bring them down further.
Anything about this problem, it's insoluble. We cooperated more closely with the French, got a new returns agreement with Albania, increased the number of raids we were doing to tackle illegal working, arrested hundreds of people connected with this trade. That's how we got the numbers down. But there is more to do. But it's really important, it's essential that we stop people coming here illegally, because it's simply not fair. It should be us, your government, who decides who comes to our country and not criminal gangs.
He used the word fairness there, which is a very typical word for politicians to use. But I do like the tone in which he delivers that. It does feel like fairness is important to him. And the way that he says it suggests that that underpins some of his values and his approach to politics. So that came across quite well.
Next, the NHS and waiting lists. Now, look, I come from an NHS family.
Which we hear every single time he ever makes a public appearance.
And over the past year, we have put record resources into the NHS. More money than ever before, but more doctors, more nurses, more ambulances, 200 community diagnostic centres and surgical hubs. That's why the NHS today is treating more people than it has ever done in its history. But we have to be frank. Although we've virtually eliminated the people waiting the longest,
I don't think he should say we've virtually eliminated the people waiting the longest, because that sounds super ominous for those people.
Made a significant enough dent in the waiting lists. Now, partly that is due to industrial action, although I am pleased that we have managed to reach reasonable and fair pay settlements with over 1 million NHS workers, including our nurses.
Bit of a point about the audience here. It does seem really flat now. There was all of that energy at the beginning, big round of applause, but now a few minutes into the speech and the energy in that room seems very low. And you can't imagine that happening with a Nigel Farage, a Boris Johnson, one of those people with a bit more charisma. So I think this is a bit of an issue for him, that people are listening very obediently, but are they really into what he's talking about? It doesn't seem that way to me.
We saw towards the end of last year that when there was a period with no industrial action, in fact, waiting lists came down. They fell by 65,000.
Okay, so we've probably got enough to be able to make an assessment of his performance, and I would say there are some positives. It's easy to criticize a prime minister who's having a difficult time in the polls. But if you just look at the speech from a communications perspective, you can see that he's a very polished performer. He's speaking without notes. He's got a very good understanding of the detail, and he's able to put the right tone and energy into the words that he is delivering. So there is something very polished, very professional, and really high quality about the way in which he delivered his speech. On the negative side, as we've said, he was a bit out of control, being in the round, wandering around a bit too much. A bit more stability would have helped. His messages were very detailed, but I think we could have done with a bigger picture narrative, something slightly more inspirational, perhaps. And also that point about the audience engagement. He was in a local area speaking to local people, and he didn't engage with them. And it all felt like they were there to be the backdrop for the 6 o'clock news instead of people that he really wanted to speak to. So that does make him come across a little bit aloof and a bit disconnected from ordinary people. On the whole, I'd say this was a well delivered, polished performance, but some of those key points weren't really hitting home for me. So it was more a 3.5 out of 5 rather than a 4 or a 5 out of 5. That's what I think. It would be great to hear what you think. So please do make comments down below. And if you've enjoyed this video, then do like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And we'll see you again soon for another video. Goodbye.